Awesome. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So welcome. We are on week 3 of our roundtable series. For those of you that don't know, my name is Samantha Beningo. I am the CEO and founder of Mind Movement. I am also a substance abuse and mental health counselor and a yoga instructor. And today I have invited Molly Godfrey, who is an intimacy and relationship coach, to join me. Do you want to add anything to that introduction?
That's great. Thanks for having me. Yes, so I'm a trained desire and intimacy coach. I specialize in the realm of subtle communication, man-woman dynamics, the masculine, the feminine, creating deeper intimacy, partnership, all the things that go along with that.
Yeah. And the reason that we originally started this dialogue was recognizing that could be a while we are all sort of stuck at home. Certainly in New York City, that's an unusual situation, and particularly here, but I'm sure this is true everywhere. Couples don't necessarily get to spend a lot of time together. We're all kind of overachieving, working really hard. And so we are spending an unusual amount of time together. And the question is, how does that affect our relationships? And our thought was that there is an immediate need for support because that can, be double-sided. So it might be helpful. We talk so much, Molly, about the masculine and feminine, and I wonder if it's not just useful to start there with helping people understand what that dynamic can look like. And I know that's a very big conversation, but just as a starting beginner discussion.
Yeah, for sure. I've been brushing up on my own content and just training, so we'll see how this goes. But to start, the feminine, so it's really easy to generalize feminine as female, masculine as men, but it's important that we distinguish that both women and men. So I have masculine and feminine. Men have both feminine and masculine parts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there are distinct qualities to it, but it's also just very an energetic part of ourselves. So the feminine, to put it simply, is rooted in desire. So rooted in desire, and then the masculine is the production and the service of that desire. So the feminine can look very dynamic, expressive, creative, intuitive, and then the masculine is very production oriented, goal oriented, direct, overt. So the ultimate union is that within each of us we have this this guiding force in us, whether we call it our purpose or our calling. It's this thing inside of us that wants to be expressed, wants to come out, and then our masculine we use to be in service of that. So for different people, it looks like different things. It might be directed towards a career, it might be directed towards a partnership or a family, but it's important to know that these two components inside of yourself are always, the goal is to have them in union, so in service to each other. And so at different times of our life, we might be in touch with one aspect more. One might be like not quite cultivated or not quite needed at the time. So there's just like at different points in our life, it's not a linear journey, or it's not a linear even way to discuss it. It's just knowing that these exist, and like how to tap into, how to be in touch, but then also how to recognize them in your partner as well.
Yeah. And when you say desire in the feminine, I also am aware that that's a creativity. It's sort of like a creative, like birthing, like place as well. So it's sort of like you're birthing this idea, and then execution is more of like the masculine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, the ultimate partnership, and even just the ultimate realization in yourself is just letting go and accepting those parts and listening to them more, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just bringing more union to them and yourself, and then to another person as well.
Absolutely. And so, can you describe just briefly for us how this might play out in romantic relationship, or how you might see this play out in a romantic relationship?
Definitely. Um, so in a romantic relationship, I'll use the generalizations as man, woman. So as the woman in the relationship, someone in the relationship, you're the power and the power and the like life force and energy comes from the feminine. So at different points, the woman might hold it more or the man might hold it more, but a lot of times it's going to originate in the woman. And so as that pole in the relationship, it's important that as women, we stay rooted in what it is that we want, what it is that we're feeling, our truth, our intuition. And the masculine, their pull is really to be in service of that. So they don't hold that same energetic energy. While they have like different flavors of it, like just men themselves don't naturally inherently have that, and they can turn towards it and they can cultivate it, but their conditioning is like being of service, holding space, being a provider, being like the strength behind the more dynamic, expressive tendencies. So in my own relationship and just in my own journey, my work is to always just stay rooted in like what it is that I want, what am I working towards, what like what brings me passion, what makes me happy. And then I really like being in a relationship with I'm heterosexual, so I like being in a relationship with a man because there's parts of me that I can't access. Like I do have a masculine part, but when a masculine is in my life, there's a way that I can let go in his presence and let him hold some of those things for me. And so I can continue to explore further and my desire, come out more, express more. And so, and his job is he's like, my partner's a banker. Like he's not on this esoteric, creative expressive journey. He gets purpose from his career and he loves doing that and he's in demand and like that's where he gets his purpose. And so his role isn't to be the super dynamic creative one in the relationship. His role is to just be like a steady presence in the relationship and just like hold space for me and like draw out more from me. So that's how our dynamic looks. But it can flip flop. So I've also been in a relationship with super more feminine men that were creative people, that were writers. And so I went out to work and I had the more 9-to-5 structure and he was the more creative one. But then we just like, it was fluid. So it was nice. And my partner now is also like sensitive and creative as well. But the ultimate realization relationship is the fluidity between the two, but also like distinct roles at the same time. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. I think when you're listening to this conversation, the best way to think about it is in your personal experiences. And that's natural for us anyway, but that's certainly, there's a lot of things that never made sense to me on paper until I started talking to you. So as soon as we started chatting about, intimacy and relationship dynamics, it's like, wow, yeah, that all makes sense and may defy logic in certain ways. And so one of the things I'm just really aware of in talking to you is that, there's so much ignorance, there's such a lack of awareness and understanding. And I think because we have tried to be gender neutral and, offered that politically correctness in our lives, which of course is, a wonderful thing. And we want everybody to be free to be who they are. But it also then can make it more difficult to have this conversation about, traditional masculine and feminine. And it's not about gender, right? It's about these two parts of us, but then also which part of us we're more naturally drawn to, and then in our romantic relationships, how that comes together.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And it's really helpful to kind of understand some of this. So, yeah, I'm wondering what you might be seeing as someone who's, bread and butter is to talk about this stuff all day long. What you might be seeing is happening now with this pandemic and all of us kind of being forced at home.
Yeah, definitely. That was helpful. It's interesting. I think that I'm going to go high level and then we can break it down. But I think that one thing I also forgot. So the feminine is rooted in nature. It's just like the natural course of how things want to work, of life, like, and so what's happening right now is a force of nature. Like none of us really predicted this. It just, it just is occurring on a really high level that none of us have any control of. We're all like, it's calling us to really deeply surrender and let go into this experience, which is in essence the feminine. Like there's just an element of like, yeah, surrender. And so I've been watching this from the beginning and just like, wow, this is actually, what is happening is so smart, and it's nature, and it's like most simplest form what's happening. So and it's stripping away everything that's not working. So all of like, we're forced to sit in this space of who are we when we're not able to produce, when we're not able to, like, our value right now is not in making money. It's not in like our output. Like we're actually just really being asked to sit in this space of just being and letting go and surrendering, which is the nature of the feminine. And so what I'm seeing is in relationships, there's just like a lot more feelings right now and emotions that are coming up. And what else can I say on that? So what I'm seeing right now, specifically in a lot of relationships, is that like people are bickering, people are fighting over small things. Like people are really starting to get annoyed with each other. And so people are reaching out, and like the women in my life are like, we're getting in this fight and I'm doubting and I'm questioning my relationship and blah, blah, blah. And then when we finally just got honest and said the thing that was on our mind, then we both felt better. And so this concept of withholding just really came up in my mind. And we talk about this a lot too, how it's so much easier to complain. Like complaining is the easiest form of connection. It's a cheap form of, or not the easiest form, but it's easy. Commiserating, complaining, and one downing each other. And so right now that's a really easy space to be in because there's just so much going on. But what I'm really seeing in a lot of couples is the more vulnerable thing to express love and joy and gratitude. And so right now we're bickering at each other. We're finding all these faults and just annoyed. But what I'm feeling is like we actually really, really love our partners. We have this deep connection. We're really grateful to have them right now. And that's the more vulnerable thing to admit to. And so I've been like kind of coaching some people and like, okay, what's underneath that? Underneath it is just like, I want like real connection right now. I don't want to be commiserating. I don't want to be in anxiety. Like I miss you, and I miss that, like that dropping in that we don't have right now because there's so much on top of it. And so just the idea that we withhold love, like the biggest withhold we have is usually just love and gratitude. And so that's what's like, and the biggest telltale signs when we're withholding is we're trying to control, we're very critical, we're having all these expectations, we're trying to overachieve. Like whenever those come into play, I'm like, oh, like what am I withholding? Like what am I not expressing? And so we're just all in this really feminine state right now that we're not necessarily used to. And so that's just what what I've been noticing. I don't know if you want to.
Mm-hmm. When you, so this concept of being more emotional and communicating these more heartfelt feelings, is that something that's more natural to the feminine than the masculine?
Um, it's in essence, it's what do I want to say? We all have that inside of us. I think where we get stuck is then communicating and feeling trusting that we're going to be received well. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing is there's like a big bottleneck of things that we don't necessarily have the tools to navigate or communicate right now, and
Mm-hmm.
especially for the masculine that's not used to coming in touch with this part of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's like an impasse that's going on right now. But yes, put it simply, the feminine is used to being in that space, and a lot of us are being confronted with uh, being confronted with the reality of that. And so how do we communicate that in connection with someone? How do we like let go and accept it in ourselves? Like, how do we be in it? There's just like, there's a lot of uh, like just collective energy right now that's not being potentiated. So how can we like acknowledge, oh, when I'm feeling crazy, am I actually annoyed at something, or am I just really grateful? Am I really like in connection, and like, is it love that I'm withholding?
Mm-hmm.
Is it an actual resentment? Because when there's too much backed up love, that's when it becomes a resentment.
Right. Yep. So, in other words, there's a part of us that just really wants to connect to the positive emotions, to that deep sense of connection. But then there's also a part of us that feels the need to withhold it. For what reason? Why would I not just, if that's what I'm really longing for, why can't I just do that so easily?
Because it's super vulnerable.
Mm.
It's super vulnerable to admit that I have this really basic need. Like, we're so ashamed. Like, as a society,
Mm.
independence, independence, self-sufficiency, that's so exalted.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of having to depend on other people, and the idea of having needs and like wanting actual connection is so shamed. So we're just conditioned that like, oh, if I want attention, oh, if I want like connection right now, it's so shamed out of us that when we do, like when we come in touch with that, it's so deeply vulnerable that it's like we don't have the tools to navigate it and like let go into it.
Yeah.
And it's tragic, I think.
So there's also the first thing that I thought of was not was rejection too. It was like just this deep fear of what if they can't receive that, or what if they don't feel the same way, or whatever it is, just this feeling of not wanting to be, I guess, shamed or disappointed.
Totally. Totally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really then it's our instinct to want to connect to all of those, because I was just going to ask you, and it sounds like you already answered it, how does this, like all of this push, like feminism and push for equality, affect our relationships negatively, potentially, because we're not able to embrace these more traditional parts of ourselves that are actually wanting to express in order to have the harmonious relationship or the ideal connection?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but I think there's a toxic mimic of. I think there's a toxic mimic of like feminism, and it's like I need to do everything myself. I need to have it all together. Like, I don't need a man. Like, equal rights, blah blah blah. It's like, for sure, like we have voices and we need to be heard and we are powerful, but we actually are doing more harm when we are like in this we're doing more harm in that way, because what our feminine really really wants is to like, intimacy is revealing yourself to someone. And when we push people away and we're not accessible and we're saying like, we can do it, I've got it, we're not letting the masculine actually be in service to this thing that wants to come out more. And so then we're training the masculine, like, you're not needed, you're not important. Like, it's actually a really toxic dynamic that I see constantly. And it's a very loaded thing to step into. So I do want to be conscious of that. But like, women come up to me all the time. They're like, how do I have it all? Like, how do I have the career? How do I have the deep loving partnership? And it's like, you let the man in. Like, you don't act like you have it all together. Like, he actually wants to feel your dynamic range of crazy, messy, I need help. Like, your power is in your receptivity and allowing people to be of service to you and to help you. Your power is not in trying to do it all yourself. And I think that's the toxic mimic of like feminism. And it's like, I just don't subscribe to it. And this is like my own, like, I am more powerful when I am being deeply seen by someone and letting them be of service to that, because they then, like, they become more brilliant in the presence of that. They get called to higher service. They get called to have these parts of themselves come out, where if I am just withholding and keeping it all to myself, they don't get to do that. And that's what I see so much in this company that you're building. Like, your desire is just igniting everyone to come forth and contribute in a way that if you just like try to do it all yourself, all of our team members wouldn't grow, and we wouldn't evolve, and we wouldn't get to be a part of this. And so it's like this company on like a macro level, but then individually.
Yep.
Level.
Totally. I think this is such an important conversation. It's also, we can redefine what these words mean, what feminism means, because if you have had the opportunity to be in that perfect union, there is such a power in it, and it is such a perfect feeling, right? I mean, in a more like in the wisdom tradition realm, we talk about that as like a place of enlightenment, and that's like what the Tantra is. It's studying that masculine and feminine dynamic and that union, and trying to cultivate that union to step further into the enlightened place. And so there really is. This isn't just. I think there's a real primal draw to this kind of way of engagement, but also it's part of why relationships are failing so in such an extreme way. Like, we have screwed this up royally because of exactly what you're saying, this really strong desire to, and I think we screwed it up before too. It's not like we ever had this right. It wasn't like the 1940s were the right dynamic either. We just screwed this up across the board by not understanding these two parts of ourselves and how these two things can come together in such a perfect union if you allow that and stop resisting, right? Like you're saying, withholding. When I hear that, what I really hear is resisting these parts of ourselves that may want to be vulnerable and that we might be drawn to behave in accordance with, but are pushing against because of that sense of, vulnerability, or what the fear of the consequences of allowing those feelings and behaviors to come forward.
Yeah, exactly. And then what else do I want to say? Yeah, you put that really well.
So because I'm thinking right now, right, this is something that just, referencing my own relationships, in every corner of all of them has always been problematic, right? Because of, right, as a woman that is very independent and in touch with the things I want to do and the person I want to be, and I don't necessarily know how to make room for somebody else, and don't necessarily know how to be vulnerable and ask for help. So it creates constant tension because I'm basically keeping the other person from being able to do what it is that they're drawn to do and asking for, and then also withholding what I naturally need and want because of that commitment to being a powerhouse. Um, and so, and as I look around at all of the relationships that I see have ever really played out, that's a problem. I mean, in one form or another, it's problematic. It's sort of like we are not, we haven't been told or taught how to allow the best of each of us to come forward into the space.
Yeah. It's so tricky. It just happened with me like 2 days ago because I'm launching a group program. So I told my partner about it, and like he just started coming in and like asking all these questions, and I was like, this is annoying. Like I can figure this out. And I was like, oh, he wants to help. And if I don't actually like let him and like give him an opportunity, that's a form of emasculating, because his heart, like his inherent heart, men, like he's my partner, he wants to be helpful, he wants like to feel that he's contributing in some way. And so me shutting him down and being like, I don't need your help, like yeah, blah blah blah, great advice, like that is really damaging. And so I have to actually go back and clean that up a little bit. But it happened so fast. And because I've done this training, I know, but otherwise I would have just brushed it off and like kept going on in my life and like ignored that. And so I'm then training him I'm training him to check out of our relationship. I'm training him to not give a shit about what I'm doing. I'm training him that he's dumb and whatever he says isn't valuable. And so then he becomes resentful at me, and then he becomes resentful at the things that I'm doing, and then it dies. And it just happens in that one moment. Yeah. And it's challenging.
It's so sad though too. It's so sad that in a way we have trained ourselves and trained each other not only to not be able to embrace who we are, but then creating trauma, all kinds of expectations for our next relationships, where we get stuck again and we recreate the same habits and the same problems in the next one and in the next one. And then we go, well, why can't I find the right partner? I mean, it's like, well, you never had a chance because you just keep recreating the same problem over and over and over again.
Right. And it happens in a minute. And if I don't go back and clean that up and like acknowledge that he wanted to be helped, like if I don't go back in and take responsibility, that is just going to be like a rotten like residue that we have. And so, but that takes like a really conscious, like you have to catch it. You have to be willing to stand for that connection that you really want, go back in and clean it up, and then like stay open instead of, so then his work is just going to have to keep like showing up and staying open in the face of me learning how to navigate this in connection with him. So it's just like, it's a really, it's an evolved level of
engagement
with each other.
Yeah. Why do you think that in early relationships, in the beginning stage, we're able to be more, I don't know, vulnerable, but we're able to, it's almost like when we're first meeting and, falling in love, we don't have this problem. And then as we step further into partnership, it gets much more problematic. Why would that be?
That's a good question. I think, well, kind of what we just hit on. I think there's a lot of stuff that if it doesn't get cleaned up, it just continues to build on.
Yeah.
I think also you see like more is being revealed and you're seeing more about the person. And so that's uncomfortable because the more you see, you don't like it's like, okay, am I willing to continue to love this person even though I just like, they've just revealed something more? Am I willing to love this person more here? And then like love the part of me that it's reflecting. And so you like, constantly like decide, like standing to love this person no matter what, staying connected no matter what. And that just, it gets hard. In my experience, it just gets harder to keep doing that
Mm-hmm.
and like trusting, and like there's just so much communication and like nuance that's required
Mm-hmm.
in investment that it takes a lot, and and both of you have to really be on the same page too.
Right. And trust. I mean, that's really what it takes. And I think intuitively we know that, but I'm thinking back to some of the relationships where if I had just been listening and really listening, they were asking for this, for me to do exactly what you're saying, and I was asking for them to behave in the way that I needed. But because I wasn't really listening and couldn't, really accept what was being asked, right? It just gets really imbalanced and then resentful because I'm not listening, they're not getting what they need, and then we just keep withholding. So I think listening is such an important part, and we're asking for trust, but then we're not able to give trust. And so you have to step into some level of vulnerability in order to get to a place where there is trust that can be established.
Totally. Eh, totally. And I think it comes with this, like, I think we might have talked about this before, like um when you put your safety or you put your worth like on your job or on the externals, it's very
Mhm.
conditional. So if any of them fall, you then feel like you don't feel good. And the same thing with safety. Like if I am making my partner my source of comfort, of safety, if he's like the one, like if he goes away and then I crumble, that's conditional. And so it's this really
Mm,
intense journey of, it doesn't have to be, but it just journey of like creating your own internal safety. So knowing like, no matter what I say, I'm going to be okay. If they don't receive me well, like, or if they reject me, I'm still going to be okay. But it's this like sense of self and like inner safety
mhm,
that the more it gets strengthened, the more you're able to just trust yourself inherently and then trust another person. But
mhm.
we're so conditioned to think that we it's I think it comes a lot from trauma too. Like we just put our safety in a lot of other things. And I think the
Mhm.
best like growth you can do is just like really being safe in your own self.
Right. So there's absolutely, we talk about it at Mind Movement as the victim mentality, and people misinterpret what that means, just on its face. But ultimately, it comes down to exactly that, not needing the conditions of your life to always go the way you want them to in order to be happy. And that's where relationships, to me, is where you see that play out most clearly, where if my partner doesn't take out the garbage at exactly the moment that I want them to, or if they don't, cook me dinner because they got home first in exactly the way I want them to, or if there's ever anywhere in the dynamic a place where they're not meeting my expectations, then I feel resentful. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's a conditional love and a conditional dynamic. And the problem is that we talk about unconditional love all the time, but it's very hard to be living and cohabitating and, creating a life with somebody and stay in that place of unconditional love because you're dealing with them in your home, right? Every minute of every day. And I imagine that's what people are kind of experiencing right now, is just getting at each other's throats over the little things because we're on top of each other. And it's hard to stay connected to that sense of, love and unconditional love if, number one, I don't unconditionally love myself, which is very hard to come by these days, and then also, right, allow those little things to fall by the wayside so that I can connect to that heart space and be in that place of desire with my partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And like there's no destination there, it's just an evolving journey. Like you're like every partner is going to be a teacher, every experience is going to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like to say to achieve it or to like reach it at some point isn't fair. Like it's always going to be something you cultivate more of and you deepen and you like it's not a linear have. But yes, that skill of just like unconditional love for yourself and others. And I think it's really helpful in the work that we do. We talk about like reprogramming and rewiring. When we can find a secure partner, or we can like get ourselves where we can be in a healthy relationship or a healthy partnership, we start to have new experiences. And so the work I do with my clients is like they'll be stuck in an area of vulnerability. So I'll help them write a message. I'll be help them be super accountable and help them. And they send the message or they say the thing, and then it's received well, or it goes well. And then they have this new experience in their brain that tracks to it. But so many of us don't have the experience of a healthy, intimate relationship where we've been able to be really honest. We've been able to be really upfront and say the brutally honest thing that's on our mind. We don't have that experience. And so just taking the small daily actions, like one exercise I give clients is for a week, just every day say one withhold, one desire, one truth. And you're just creating that new experience of like just speaking up, just saying something that's vulnerable. Because if you never have that experience, that wire is just like, I'm going to get hurt. It's going to go badly. It's going to go terribly. Yeah. So there is just, and we've talked about this too, like that risk involved of trying it and seeing how it goes, and, you know, trusting that it will go well. And so in the relationship of a coach or a therapist, that's often how that's modeled.
Right. It's an exposure, really.
Yeah.
You know, a slow approximation of what it is that you want the situation to look like, by rewiring. When you say one withhold, can you be more specific? What does that mean?
Yeah. So like, you hurt my feelings when you said that thing really quickly last week, or like you made that joke and that didn't actually feel good, or like you left the TV on during my call and that was really annoying. Like just anything that like annoyed you, but you didn't speak up in the moment. Then it goes in your bank of withholds. And a lot of times it's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that bothered you. I'm so sorry. Now I can stop doing that. And then something in you settles. Now you've like communicated this thing. Because a lot of times the person doesn't even know what they're doing. I think when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, like they don't know that they're leaving the socks on the floor, drives you nuts, makes you feel not respected, makes your space, like they don't know. So when you just express that, there's so much more connection on the other side that you can then have. And so it's the easiest tool, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I would imagine that both parties have to play this game. Otherwise it just feels like I'm, you know, kind of ganging up against somebody. I'm just pointing out things I don't like.
Right. Yeah. You have to do it with a lot of, I'm glad you said that. It's usually best if the other person is opted in, like, hey, I'm going to do this practice for a week where I share something on my mind every day. I am committed to this relationship. I want to increase our connection. It will always be from a place of love, but just know that I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So
I would also think that because I think so much of it is about insecure attachment, it is about thinking that someone's going to leave or worrying that I'm going to be destroyed if they do leave. And so what would you advise, especially newer couples, you know, people that are not married, and so there's a inability to leave. And I actually really believe that that's a big problem with marriage. We all, or many of us, have fantasized that piece of paper and what that'll look like. But to me, the problem is that once I've made that commitment, I now know it's much harder to leave. And there's this feeling of now I can't leave. And for me, I know that like when I'm making that choice every day to stay, because I'm not like contracted and our stuff doesn't, you know, now get divvied out 50%, whatever it is, there is a different feeling about being in the relationship. Not that I want to leave at any moment, but just not being told that I can't. There is something that's not so helpful about that. But on the other side, you know, there's this feeling of like, well, we can leave at any time. And so I don't want to be destroyed by this other person. And so there's this feeling of not wanting to be totally vulnerable until I know that someone's not just going to leave.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I'll say two things. So we're conditioned to think that it's boundaries. Like people are going to test your boundaries until you set one. But especially the female conditioning, we're taught to think if I express too much early on, if I'm too crazy, like he's going to just ghost me and stop talking. But it's actually the opposite. Like the sooner people know how we want to be treated, just it will set you up for ultimate success. So because I'm a coach, like I have just a lot of awareness on this. But for example, when I first started dating my partner, he tried to reschedule something. And so then I got annoyed and I like kind of withheld it. And then I was withdrawing and he's great. So he's like, where'd you go? Like, what's going on? And I had this moment. I was like, okay, this is a boundary. Like my time is important. I need to communicate this. And so I really like had to take the risk. I was like, do I say this and risk he's going to think I'm crazy and then never talk to me again? Or do I risk having a boundary violated and not feeling good? So I took the risk and I was like, listen, like my time is important. If we set something up, it needs to be followed, blah, 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 blah. And I just like sent it and trusted. And he came back and was like, you're right. Took responsibility. He's like, I'm not going to make excuses. And then from then on out, whenever we make plans, it's a super detailed like itinerary. And now he actually knows how to show up.
The way you need.
Like, yeah. And so it was so freeing for both of us because now he just knows the formula, what to do, how I feel safe and cared for. And I am not resentful because if I had just withheld that, like I would have just been annoyed. And then chances are I would have just stopped talking to this dude and written him off and then ghosted him. And now we're both like, he doesn't know what he did wrong. I have another column for men are annoying and incompetent. And so it just perpetuates this paradigm. And so if I can instill anything in this live, it's to just like speak up as soon as possible. If they leave, they're not the one for you because they can't like
what you need.
They're probably not emotionally available or have good communication skills. So then you win because you know this wasn't a viable partner. But then you also win because they just know how to show up and win and be with you. And so it's honestly both are a win-win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you mentioned something important. Go ahead. I don't want to.
No, I think that was it.
You mentioned we then have our belief kind of reiterated. Now, I would love to hear from you how that can play a role because certainly I was raised by a single woman. And so my modeling, is that, my father, was an adulterator. No, but that's not a secret. Right, like I had certain ideas about, what's true about men and what's true about women. How does that then potentially factor into our ability to be in partnership? And then what do we do if those things are not serving us?
Yeah. I had a similar upbringing. My parents had a super tumultuous divorce. I had really terrible relationships when I first started dating. So I just I didn't like men. They were annoying. They couldn't get it right. And then finally I just it was a teacher or a coach that was like, how's that going for you? Do you like resenting men? Do you like assuming they're going to fail all the time? Do you like not having the relationships you want? And I just kind of bottomed out on it. And I was like, no, I don't. I do. It's a part of, it was a lot of internal work ultimately, but it was really just a choice I made. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop. And I wrote about this recently. Even after my breakup, I lived in this Russian neighborhood and these Russian men would come up to me and they would say these things. And then I'd be like, I don't speak Russian. They translate, you're really beautiful. And even though my breakup had just gone so terribly, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to stop loving men. Like this man, I can appreciate what this man said and I can take it in. He's like a good-hearted person. And so it's just like a choice that we have to make. And there's for sure, there's you know, in a lot of cases it's trauma, in a lot of cases it's deep stuff. But I think ultimately, being in the position I am, I just make the choice to see the good in men every day and just assume the best of them and love them, because like they bring out a part of me that I cannot access myself. And so I guess it's kind of selfish, because I could label it like that, but like I consciously make the choice. And so that's a lot of the work I do with women, is just like clearing that out, forgiving themselves, forgiving men in the past. And it can, I think that's the huge part in this. And the same go with men. Men have been burned. Men think women are crazy. Men think like women, you know, it's just like, it's our
You're gonna get hurt. Yeah. No, I mean, forgiveness. I think that's probably the critical, most important thing that all of us need to keep in mind, because we're not a very forgiving culture. We don't talk about forgiveness often. We tend to be so self-protective that if anything, we go the other way. We, hold on, like you said, we withhold, sort of like generationally. It sort of becomes just the way that we are and what we expect in our relationships. And it's really tragic, because as you said, you never give that person a chance, and they really don't give you a chance, because we're all, like you said, just so self-protective. But also it's about self-forgiveness, right? Like allowing, and it's usually about that, right? I mean, that's really what we're always talking about, is how do we feel about ourselves? What is our sense of self-worth, as you pointed out earlier? Where do I get my sense of value? Is it from conditions? If so, I'm in big trouble when it comes to many things. But certainly in relationships, that's going to be really challenging. And I think the sad part is, all of us, I've never met anybody who wants to have a tumultuous, terrible relationship. I think we all, right? We all want that perfect ideal of like forever in love. And there are people who are able to connect like that. And my sense is this is how they are doing it, is by embracing their instinct, by embracing their roles, their natural roles, whichever way and whatever way that may look. And if we're able to honor those parts of each other and ourselves, then it can be a connection that can last and not, fizzle out over time.
Yeah. That was well put. Exactly.
Yeah. So helpful, always so helpful. So after our last few minutes we have, certainly if anybody has questions, please, you can send them to us. You can chat them to us on Zoom, or you can email to us, info@mindmovement.com. But I also am wondering now, for the last few minutes, what some of your suggestions could be for couples right now that are kind of, we're at week 4, that are bickering at each other's throats. What do we do about that?
Yeah. I just posted on Instagram yesterday this tool called a safe word. It's like just a relationship coach term, but essentially it's setting a boundary and communicating effectively, especially right now. Like, we're so together. And so it looks something like, hey, I'm going to be working all day, or hey, I'm going to be on the phone all day, or hey, I'm going to be on a project all day. If I don't look at my phone, or if we don't connect, that's why. Don't take it personally. How about we connect at 7 p.m. So it's like setting up your day, what you need. It's not because I don't love you, it's because I'm working on XYZ, and then stating a time for when you want to connect. So I call it a safe word, because it's like you're getting in touch with what you need. Like, okay, I need space for the day to work on my stuff. I can't be texting. I can't be on my phone back and forth. Like, right. I need this for myself. So self-care, taking care of that. It's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't care about you. I hope your day goes well. And then let's set a time to talk later. So it's like setting a really clear boundary, communicating all the different parts that are going on. And you can do that in anything. If you're having a fight, you can say, like, hey, I don't feel resolved from our fight. I'm going to take the rest of the afternoon to get space. I'm going to call my therapist or my coach, and then I want to talk to you again at 5 p.m. So it's like setting up super clearly, taking time for yourself, what you need. Because I think there's this expectation right now of like, I don't feel good. I feel anxious. I want to pull on you for attention. Like, I want to check in. I want to send this meme. And it's like, it's just consuming a lot of us right now, and it's starting to wear down. I know, at least in my own relationship. So it's like, just let's cleanly, like, we care, we love about each other. Let's do what we need to do today. Set a time to connect intentionally where it actually feels good. But there's a way to have it feel good. And so I call it a safe word. It's like, I'm safely going to communicate what I'm doing. I'm going to like acknowledge that we're connected, that I care about you. And then I'm going to like, let's negotiate on a time to reconvene later. So that's a tool I'm encouraging people to try out and use. Yeah.
Yeah, well, also alleviates anxiety about when are we going to connect, when are we going to talk, what time are we going to spend, you know, like, because I think the uncertainty in a relationship unravels everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it settles that vigilant sense, because, as also good for the men on here to know, it's just biology. Women, we have the larger vigilant centers. We have young children that we need to protect. We're always scanning the environment. And so when you can learn to settle that part of her brain by just really clearly giving her certainty and communicating, like, then she can be like, oh, okay, like, he loves me, he still cares about me, and then we're going to talk later today. And it's like, there's just something that lets go. We're still connected. That feels really good inside of that. And so I've utilized that in past relationships, and it's just a tool that I think is so underutilized, but so great and so easy for both people to feel good inside of.
Yeah. Also, I think the other thing that I just want to say is that when we're both getting all of our needs met, and when this works, there is no need to go elsewhere for different needs. Because I think a lot of times what happens in relationships, when one thing breaks down, like when the sexual piece breaks down because the woman is withholding and is in that place of resentment constantly, then he kind of shuts down and looks to get that need met somewhere else. And that's just a cliche. It can go either way, obviously. It can go a number of different ways. But I think that's what we do. We look to get our needs met from different people instead of from one person. And the tragedy there is that we never really get any of our needs met, you know, from any of those people. It ends up being, right, they're all kind of incomplete dynamics. So I think if you are able, the payout here is extraordinary. So it's definitely worth listening and paying attention to, because if what you want is the ideal relationship, I think this is definitely the closest that I think in really understanding this piece, that's how to get it.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. So always so enlightening. I'm excited that we get to do this for the duration of our pandemic. It's one of the bright spots in the week for sure. So we'll be here again next week discussing a similar conversation. So if anybody has questions, please don't hesitate to email them to us, and we will continue the conversation then.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, be well, be safe, and we will meet again soon.
All right, bye guys.
Bye. Okay. Share, end meeting.